Mathias was not always mad. He was once a respected doctor, a successful businessman, and respected in their village and in the city. His story, however, is not one of triumph, but of twisted ambition, dark secrets, and a descent into madness that no one could have predicted. Mathias owned one of the largest and most prestigious restaurants in the city. His establishment, La Maison de Luxe, was famous not only for its finger-licking meals but also for the exotic clients that it attracted. Wealthy foreigners, diplomats, and dignitaries made their way to Mathias's restaurant for the fine food, the impeccable service, and, perhaps most importantly, the privacy it offered. The restaurant was more than just a place to eat, it was an exclusive sanctuary where deals were struck, favors exchanged, and transactions took place behind closed rooms. But Mathias's life wasn't just about running a restaurant. He also owned Get Well Hospital, a state-of-the-art medical facility that attracted patients from all parts of the country. His reputation as a brilliant and compassionate doctor had earned him the trust of his community. People came to him for everything from minor diseases to life-threatening conditions, and Mathias always delivered results. He treated them, cured them, and sent them on their way, seemingly without a flaw in his practice. The hospital was thriving well. But, like every good story, there was a dark side to this success. While Mathias treated countless patients, some didn't leave the hospital as they should have. They came in, sick or injured, and were never seen again. At first, the disappearances were not talked much because few people got lost in the hospital. But over time, whispers began to circulate. People started talking. Some said that Mathias was involved in something much darker or some kind of cult or maybe killing people in his hospital and perhaps burying them. These questions and confusion were rampant to the owners of the patients who got lost in unexplainable circumstances. But none of them could prove anything. Not yet. In his hospital, Mathias was a genius. He had access to the latest medical technology, and patients from different counties came to him for cures they couldn't find anywhere else. His reputation as a healer spread far and wide. However, this success did not come without its price. The hospital had a secret, a hidden, sinister operation that Mathias carefully guarded. In the back rooms of Get Well Hospital, behind the locked doors and sealed windows, Mathias conducted illegal surgeries on his patients. He harvested organs from the sick and dying, and once the procedures were over, he sold these organs to foreign buyers who paid a fortune for them. The demand for black market organs was high, and Mathias was the man who could deliver. The hospital's advanced technology allowed him to perform the surgeries with precision, and the secrecy of the operation kept everything out of sight from law enforcement and the public eye. But Mathias wasn't alone in this operation. He had a network of buyers, shadowy figures from distant lands, men who never showed their faces and dealt in whispers. These buyers came to La Maison de Luxe for meetings, where they could speak freely and conduct their business without fear of prying eyes. The restaurant was more than just a place for fine dining, it was also a front for Mathias's illegal dealings. No one suspected that the smiling, friendly owner of the restaurant was also the mastermind behind one of the most lucrative underground operations in the country. Behind the restaurant, there was a hidden room that no one else knew about. This is where Mathias and his buyers would meet to strike a deal. The room was hidden behind a thick, velvet curtain in the farthest corner of the restaurant. It was a space sealed off from the rest of the world. Inside, the atmosphere was cold, sterile, like a surgical theater, but far more sinister. A large industrial refrigerator sat in the corner of the room. The fridge was filled with organs, preserved in sterile containers, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. The room also held medical equipment, scalpels, surgical tools, and various devices for maintaining the health of the harvested organs. Mathias would use these tools to prepare the organs for transport, ensuring they remained viable for the buyers. The secrecy of the room was paramount, no one was allowed in, and no one ever suspected its existence. Mathias ran this operation with a sharp precision. He was a calculative man, and always one step ahead of anyone who might come too close to discovering his dark secrets. His buyers were always careful, meeting him only in the restaurant, and never contacting him directly through phone or email. They knew better than to trust anything that could be traced back to them. These transactions took place under the guise of ordinary business deals. Nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary to the people who dined at La Maison de Luxe. It was during one of the festive seasons when Mathias returned to his village in Zawi, his hometown. This is where he was raised. In the village, Mathias was known for his kindness, his generosity, and his humble nature. He had earned the title of the village doctor, not just because of his medical skills, but because of the way he took care of his people. Every year, without fail, Mathias would come home with gifts, clothes for needy families, food, and sometimes even money to help those struggling. He would slaughter animals during the end-of-year celebrations, making sure everyone had enough to eat. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. The village elders admired him deeply and would often shower him with praises, while drinking a glass of Muratina, a local alcoholic drink. At the verge of end year, the village elders were always ready to lose their way home coming from the village doctor. This was their norm and they liked it. But this year was different. This year, as Mathias drove up the winding road to his village, something changed. It was the same road he'd traveled countless times before, but today, fate had something else in store for him. The drive up of the Nzawi hill was always a peaceful one. Mathias sat at the wheel, his hands steady and calm. The children in the backseat were laughing and teasing each other, their voices full of joy. His wife, Mary, sitting beside him, smiled at the sight of their family, her heart full of warmth as they approached their village for the holiday celebrations. But today, something felt different. Mary glanced at her husband, noticing the subtle tension in his face, the way his grip on the steering wheel tightened. It wasn't like him to seem so uneasy. She tilted her head, concern creeping into her voice. "Honey, is everything okay?" Mary asked softly, her eyes fixed on him. "You seem tense." Mathias didn't respond right away, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He was always so calm, so composed, but today there was a cloud hanging over him. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the feeling, but his heart was beginning to race, and his senses were telling him something was wrong. "I'm fine, Mary," he replied, his voice tight but reassuring. "Just a little tired, that's all." But Mary wasn't convinced. She watched him closely, noticing how his eyes darted back and forth, looking the road with a nervous intensity. She could see the way his jaw clenched and the tension in his shoulders. "Are you sure?" she pressed gently, her voice tinged with concern. "You've been working so hard lately. Maybe you should take a break when we reach home." Mathias forced a smile, trying to ease her worry. "I'm fine, really." The children, oblivious to the growing tension, continued to joke around in the back seat, their carefree laughter echoing through the car. Little did they know, their father's mind was racing, and the feeling of something being terribly wrong only grew stronger. Then it happened. The car began to shudder slightly. It was a subtle hesitation in the vehicle's movement, as if something had malfunctioned. Mathias frowned, his fingers tightening on the steering wheel. The road was steep, the incline becoming sharper as they neared the riverbank. The brakes, which should have been steady and reliable, seemed to be failing. Mathias's foot slammed down harder on the pedal, but the car kept picking up speed. Suddenly, the car geared forward, and panic gripped Mathias's chest. His heart raced as the car began to barrel down the narrow hill, the engine roaring in defiance of his attempts to stop it. The panic was overwhelming. He could feel the car sliding faster and faster, its wheels screeching against the road. "Mathias!" Mary cried out, her voice suddenly full of alarm. She looked at him, eyes wide with terror. "Honey, please. What's happening? What's wrong?" The children's laughter had stopped. Instead, their voices rang out with frantic fear, calling for their father. "Daddy! Daddy, what's happening?" One of the children screamed from the back seat, their small voices went high with panic. Mary's hands gripped the armrest, her face pale. She turned to Mathias, her voice rising in desperation. "Please, Mathias. Help. Do something." But Mathias was frozen. His mind was scrambling to process the situation, his heart pounding in his chest. He slammed the brakes again, but nothing changed. In a desperate move, Mathias unbuckled his seatbelt with trembling hands and, as the car reached its tipping point, threw himself out of the window, hoping to escape the inevitable crash. "Honey, no!" Mary screamed as Mathias threw himself out of the car. Her voice was filled with panic and disbelief, but it was too late. Mathias flew through the air, the wind rushing past him as he landed hard on the rocky ground. His head behind him, the car continued its descent, crashing into the river with a deafening splash. The sound of the car hitting the water was followed by the horrified screams of the villagers who had heard the commotion. They were rushing down the hill to help. Mathias could only watch, helpless, as the river swallowed the car and everything he had ever loved. He could hear Mary's voice, calling out to him through the chaos. But the world around him was spinning, and his vision was fading. The pain in his body was unbearable, but it paled in comparison to the pain in his heart as he realized the truth: his children, his beautiful wife, were gone, just like that. Mathias tried to move, but his body wouldn't cooperate. His legs were broken, and his shoulder was crushed, the force of the fall making him almost unrecognizable. He tried to scream, but the sound came out as a hoarse whisper, barely audible over the roar of the river. The screams of the villagers grew louder as they neared the riverbank, their voices filled with horror and disbelief. They pulled Mathias from the rocks, lifting him as gently as they could, but there was no comfort in the situation. He was alive, but broken, and his heart was shattered. The pain in his legs, his head, his shoulder, none of it compared to the devastation of what he had lost. Mathias's eyes, filled with tears, scanned the river. The car was already completely submerged, disappearing into the roaring water. The villagers tried to dive in, but the current was too strong, the water too deep. The search was futile. The damage was done. They rushed him to the local hospital. The pain was unbearable, but the fear of losing everything was worse. Eventually, after 8 months of treatment, Mathias was discharged from the hospital. But when he returned to his city home, he was met with an unimaginable shock. His once beautiful house, the place where he had lived with his family, had been sold off. The workers, who were supposed to care for the property in his absence, had sold it. Mathias found nothing: no furniture, no possessions, no memories of the life he had built. His home was gone, and it felt like the final blow to a life already in ruins. Even worse, his successful restaurant, La Maison de Luxe, which had been a symbol of his success, was now in the hands of foreign investors. The once popular establishment, where dignitaries and wealthy guests had dined, was no longer his. The investors had assumed he was dead. His family, his legacy, everything he had worked for was no longer his to control. It was as though Mathias had never existed. A month later, the rumors and allegations began to spread. The whispers turned into accusations, and soon, the truth came out. The government had closed down his clinic, Get Well Hospital, and confiscated all of its documents. Investigations revealed that Mathias had been involved in the illegal harvesting and sale of human organs. His reputation, once spotless, was now tainted with one of the darkest crimes imaginable. The news shocked everyone. How could this respected doctor, who had once helped so many, be capable of such atrocities? Mathias's name was now associated with the most heinous of crimes: human trafficking and the illegal trade of organs. It was discovered that, while running his hospital, Mathias had secretly been harvesting the organs of his patients and selling them to foreign buyers. Now, Mathias found himself not only fighting for his health but also for his sanity and his future. The charges against him were severe. He was prosecuted for his involvement in the illegal organ trade, harvesting organs from the dead and the living to sell to the highest bidder. The authorities moved quickly, auctioning off his remaining businesses to pay for the legal battles ahead. Everything he had built was being taken from him. Mathias was placed in jail, awaiting transfer to the maximum security Kamitai prison. As he was assessed by the authorities, it became clear that his mental and physical health had deteriorated beyond repair. The doctors concluded that Mathias was not fit to be held in a regular prison. He needed psychiatric care, and so, he was transferred to a psychiatric facility. At first, there was a glimmer of hope. The doctors believed that with time and care, Mathias might recover. But as the weeks passed, it became apparent that he wasn't responding to treatment. His mind, fractured by the trauma of the accident, the guilt of his crimes, and the loss of everything he had loved, refused to heal. Mathias remained silent, his once strong and confident voice now reduced to nothing. He was left in a wheelchair, unable to speak, but still able to hear everything around him. His body was weak, but his mind was still alert, trapped in a cage of his own thoughts. After some time, Mathias was discharged from the psychiatric facility. The hospital could no longer help him, and no one was willing to care for him. His family, his friends, the people he had once helped, everyone deserted him. Mathias took to the streets and sold his wheelchair so that he can get some money and catch the earliest bus to his village, Colamba. In the village, news had spread through the TV and the local vernacular language. No one who wanted to associate himself, even the village elders who revered him. The family members deserted him as time goes, and he found himself walking with clutches from one home to another, asking for food and begging for help. Some people took pity on him, offering him a meal or a small amount of money. Others, however, turned him away, unwilling to help the man who had once been a symbol of success and respect in their community. People began to call him the food timer, the man who would knock at their doors just as they were sitting down to eat. Mathias had no choice but to keep going, one house after another, asking for food, asking for mercy. The humiliation was unbearable, but Mathias had no choice. During funerals in the village, it was a big day for Mathias. He knew that day he would eat and carry something alongside his dirty trouser and coat pockets. He attended the funerals gladly. The first time, Mathias had stumbled into a burial service, clearly looking for food. In his broken state, he wandered the village, where funeral processions were happening, hoping to catch a meal. But as he stood among the mourners, something inexplicable happened. He began to laugh. The laughter was loud and uncontrollable, echoing across the somber gathering, as if the grief and mourning were completely lost on him. The villagers, used to seeing him as the madman who had lost everything, ignored him. The second time, it was at another burial. The grief-stricken faces of the mourners, the somber ritual of the occasion, did not have the usual impact on Mathias. Again, as the burial proceeded, he began laughing uncontrollably. But this time, something was different. The laughter was not just disturbing, it seemed out of place. People took notice, and their concern grew. Whispers spread among the mourners. "Why is he laughing at a time like this?" someone asked. Others looked away, but the discomfort lingered. Then came the third time. It was a burial like no other. The chief of the neighboring village, Chief Mathias, had passed away. His funeral was attended by nearly everyone in the village, a grand affair. The atmosphere was heavy with sorrow, and the air felt thick with grief. Yet again, Mathias appeared, wandering aimlessly through the crowd. As soon as he arrived at the burial site, he couldn't contain himself. He burst into loud, wild laughter. The mourners were taken aback, some confused, others visibly upset. After the funeral, few days passed and Mathias was found dead. Mathias was lying dead by the side of the road, just another forgotten soul in the village.